What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. It is Season 2, and today we have a packed episode including the voice of the Washington Commanders. Bram Weinstein is going to be on later in this episode, but first, I do want to talk about some stuff that has happened since the last episode back in Season 1. I believe that was a recap of the draft and every single pick that Washington chose from it. First being the big thing, and probably my favorite thing that has happened for Washington since back in May or February or April, where that was, Terry McLaurin, 3-year, $71 million extension. I mean, he is really the face of the Washington Commanders right now in terms of players. If Washington didn't re-sign him, I don't really know what would happen. The fan base would get very mad at Washington, first of all. We would lose a lot of fans. I mean, he is my favorite player in the NFL right now. He's a lot of people's favorite players in the NFL. Even some people that aren't even Washington fans, he is their favorite player because just the explosiveness that he can bring to the field. I mean, it's great that Washington got this done. Now, up next is probably either Daron Payne or, I guess Daron Payne's the big one, Cole Holcomb, as well as you really got to flip it to the defensive side of things now for these next few years with that entire front four besides Jonathan Allen having to become re-signed, plus some of the linebackers as well, like Cole Holcomb, who I think Washington should really re-sign because we don't really have any great linebackers right now, and Cole Holcomb is our best one. So, yeah. Also, Washington hasn't really made any big signings in this last 3 months, which I didn't really expect it. We don't really make big splashes in free agency. Last big one we really did was like Josh Norman, and we know how that turned out. So nothing really in terms of new free agents or new players on the teams in terms of starters. We have signed some guys, like some undrafted free agents and stuff from the draft to like fill up the 90-man roster, but nothing really happening big time in free agency. Now, as I'm recording this, it is day 3 of training camp, but by the time this comes out, I believe there'll be a few more days into it. I mean, things are looking really great for Washington in terms of training camp so far. Probably the biggest star from training camp within the first week here is Jahan Dodson. He has looked very good for Washington. I think I haven't really heard any other beat reporters talking about other teams' rookie wide receivers as much as Jahan Dodson has been talked about. Some of the catches that he has made here in training camp, this guy could be very special. I was pretty low on him coming into the draft. I had him as my wide receiver 5 or 6, maybe even 7 at the time. I didn't really like him, but some of the stuff that he's doing, he's a guy that is ready to start right now, and that's what Washington needs if Ron Rivera and that coaching staff wants to keep their jobs. So here in the first week, it has been pretty balanced, I would say. Day 2 of training camp, it was really the defense, a bunch of interceptions off of Carson Wentz and the backup quarterbacks as well. A lot of great pass breakups as well for the defense. But on day 3, on Friday, it was the offense that really turned it up. They got their revenge on that defense, and they had some bombs. I saw Sam Howell throwing some incredible passes. I saw Carson Wentz hitting Jahan Dodson in stride multiple times. I mean, that offense, that connection with Wentz and Dodson and Howell and Brown are looking really great right now. Now, there is some sad news for Washington. Chase Young is going to miss the start of the season. Hopefully it's not a lingering injury. Hopefully he doesn't get put on the PUP list to enter the season or the IR to enter the season, as if he does, I believe he'll be out for the first 4 games minimum. And with that, I think they're going to have to sign someone if that were the case. I think the overall key for Washington is staying healthy because in some other training camps for other teams, we've seen some pretty big name stars go down, including for the Bucs, Ryan Jensen, their starting center. He's going to have, which will most likely be a season-ending knee injury. Bills safety Micah Hyde on Friday, he got carted off with a non-contact injury coming down with an interception. That doesn't look good for Buffalo, which they had Tre'Davious White have a season-ending injury in the middle of the season last year. So that secondary, which is one of the best in the NFL when healthy, if it gets hurt, then it's not one of the best in the NFL anymore. And then finally, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the interview, but Ryan Kerrigan, the all-time franchise sack leader for the Washington Commanders, or the Washington franchise, has retired. He's going to sign a 1-day contract with Washington to retire as a Commander. I mean, this guy, ever since I started watching Washington football, he was on that team. He was on the team every year from the highs to the lows. He wasn't really on the best teams, but he really made a big impact. My favorite moment from him was when he was strip sacked Dak Prescott in like the final 5 minutes of one of the games. I forgot which one, but it was against the Cowboys, and then I believe it was Preston Smith who picked it up and walked it right into the end zone. That was my favorite moment from Ryan Kerrigan, but overall he was a great player, and he really made a big-time impact at Washington. And so now, without further ado, here is the interview with Bram Weinstein, the play-by-play radio broadcaster for the Washington Commanders. Now, with that being said, I would like to welcome the radio voice of the Washington Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Alright, so you joined the Washington Commanders, or I guess the Washington football team at the time, in 2020 for the play-by-play. As a native to DC, what has it been like covering the team that you grew up watching as a kid?
I mean, this is a dream job for me. I'm only the third person to hold this role since 1979, and I don't take that lightly. This was my favorite team by far growing up. It was hard to really love the 80s teams, the golden era teams for me. I'm 49.
Yeah.
And I've worked my whole career, to be in this position, and I'm very fortunate to have it, and it's a privilege. I've loved every second of it.
That's great, yeah. Alright, so since you joined in 2020, at the time Washington was going through a ton of change from the Redskins to then the football team, I guess, and to now the Commanders. What has it been like adjusting to the name and stuff? Because I know I've heard some people on the when I'm watching TV and watching games, they're still kind of mixing up the Redskins from the football team and now the Commanders. They're still calling them the Redskins. I know it's kind of a little bit like hard for a team that you've been watching and calling this team a certain name for a long period of time. What has it been like adjusting to changing basically words and sentences and stuff?
It was, it was hard at first, but I put a jar in the booth, and anytime any of us said Redskins on the air, we'd put $20 in the jar and we were going to give it to charity, and none of us ever said it. So
that's cool.
I don't know. Like it actually ended up being easier than I thought it would be. I think going to Commanders this year is going to be different for sure. I haven't decided whether I'm going to change the touchdown call yet because through the first 2 years of calling the games, it was touchdown Washington, and that still applies. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to change it or not. But will Commanders start rolling off the tongue? I mean, I don't know. But I've been doing a radio show, for the last 6 months. We call them the Commanders. I host Commanders shows, and so it's getting ingrained, and I'm getting used to it.
That's really cool. How like the jar and stuff and how that is. So Washington, as we're recording this right now, they've just started off training camp. I believe day 3 of full practice was today. What have you been liking so far from the team, and is there any player that has really stuck out to you so far here in the first week?
Yeah, I think the defense has really kind of ruled the day through the first few days, and you kind of never know like which unit's going to look better than the other at first, but the defense has really shined here. Montez Sweat's looked great in camp. Deron Payne's looked great in camp. Yeah. Kendall Fuller's had a great start. And on the other side of the ball, as first impressions go, Jahan Dodson's got it. Yeah. So this is really, it's very exciting. Like, we already know we have a pure number 1 receiver. We're hoping we have 2 of those guys now, with Jahan here. And he's just, he's so smooth. He's so incredible at last-second separation. But until they play, it's hard to make any really judgments about it. But it's a it when you see it situation, and he's got it for sure.
Yeah, I from what I've been seeing on Twitter and stuff, Jahan Dawson has made some incredible plays so far in camp. I mean, we're going to go to the quarterback position, a new quarterback coming in, of course, with Carson Wentz. Also, something that I don't think has been talked about a lot, but we did draft Sam Howell in the 5th round of this last draft. What have you been seeing from Sam Howell that you like and not so much so far?
So I think it's just early with him, and considering what the quarterback room is, where Carson Wentz is clearly the starter and nothing's really going to threaten that, and Taylor Heineke is clearly the backup and someone they trust, like, I don't see much of a path short of injuries for him getting many opportunities this year outside of the preseason. The season certainly will not have gone the way they expected if he's playing. So I don't really expect a ton. he does have really good arm strength. He's not the biggest guy, right? So Wentz towers over him. He's more built like Heineke, maybe even a little thinner, but he's got a terrific arm. And everything we hear about him is he's going to be a hard worker, he's going to study hard, and he had a success rate at North Carolina that few guys do. So, I don't know, in a couple of years, let's see where we are with him. But right now, I'd say this is a year for him to learn.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. I think that connection here in training camp and maybe into the preseason if Dyami Brown plays, but that UNC connection with Howell and Brown could be something to watch here in training camp for sure. Now, I kind of want to flip sides of the football. There's been news recently, I believe, coming out today, or maybe it was yesterday, I don't really remember, but Chase Young is going to not start the season. He's going to miss the first few games of the season with still rehabbing his torn ACL. Do you have any possible free agents, or do you think Washington will sign any possible free agents on the edges, or do you think Smith Williams and Casey Toohill are two solid guys that they think could replace him for the beginning of the season?
I think it's possible that they will sign somebody, but I think that's going to partially be based on how much time Chase is really going to miss. Yeah. All we know so far is he's not going to play in the opener. I think it's fair to think that he's going to miss more than that. Mm-hmm. And if he does go on PUP or IR to start the season, it will be 4 games minimum. And at that point, that's a possibility. And I'm more likely to believe that they're going to wait to see if a prominent player gets cut, and then maybe they would bring somebody in. But I know they like James Smith-Williams a lot, and I know they think that Toohill is a viable backup. So I don't think they see it as a need, but largely it could be someone who is unexpected available. That probably won't happen for a couple of weeks. And at that point, they'll probably know a lot more about Chase's real amount of time that he's going to miss.
Okay, yeah. That sounds about right. That sounds like how Washington has done it in the past, too. Not overreact. I mean, well, I guess sometimes they overreact. But in this case, I feel they wouldn't really sign anyone. I just kind of feel that's how it's going to go. Smith Williams will probably start. But also on the edges today, Ryan Kerrigan signed that 1-day contract with the Commanders to retire as a Commander. What was your favorite memory of him watching through the 2010s?
He was such a solid player. He was never a spectacular player, but he was a solid player. He was always available. He had this streak. He didn't miss games. And I think he's underrated around the league. I mean, the guy had almost 100 sacks.
Yeah.
So I think he was an underrated player for them. He was a good leader. He was a terrific ambassador. Largely played on not very good teams. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do sometimes, but he did it, proud to be part of the organization, regardless of the results. And I think more than anything, that's really what just kind of stands out to me. He feels kind of Ryan Zimmerman-ish to me for them. Mm-hmm. He's a really, really great ambassador for the team. And, I was glad. I thought it was nice to see that today that he came back and did that.
Yeah, he is the all-time sack leader for the Washington franchise, so I think he is definitely an underrated type player. Okay, next question here. If there is one position that you think is the strongest and one position that you think is the weakest here heading into the first few preseason games that coming up actually here in the next couple of weeks?
I would like to think the receiver group is really strong.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Stronger than they've been in a long time collectively. Mm-hmm. McLaurin, and if Samuel's healthy, and hopefully Dodson, the performance looks like the impressions, and then they really like Cam Sims. I do too. Dyami Brown might be a 5th receiver on this team. They're going to cut good players this year. I think that room is probably the strongest. The one spot I'm probably most worried about is linebacker. Cole Holcomb is transitioning to the middle linebacker. Hopefully that will go well. Jamin Davis is transitioning into becoming a player that they can count on the field, and hopefully that will work out. There's not a lot of depth behind them, and so if they are going to sign somebody, I expect it to be a middle linebacker, if for no other reason to have a fallback plan if there's an injury or if Holcomb is better served moving back to the outside. But that's the one I'm probably most worried about going into the season. Yeah,
I completely agree with linebackers. Wide receivers, too, is pretty strong. Another position that I think maybe could need some help, in my opinion, is the cornerback position. Yes, you have Kendall Fuller. He has looked strong in camp, I believe, so far. William Jackson as well, who didn't really have the best of years last year. Some people are saying because of the scheme that Washington ran on defense, but some are saying it was on him himself. Do you think that the defense last season, since it wasn't as good as it was in 2020, or at the end of 2020, do you think that's more on the players themselves or on the coaching staff?
I also think it's partly the schedule.
Oh, and
yeah. To be fair to them, and this is what's different about this year, when their schedule came out last year, they had games against Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott twice.
Mm-hmm.
It was a murderer's row of quarterbacks and really good teams, especially early. And I think that matters. When you talk about this type of stuff, their schedule this year doesn't read like that. So hopefully, the defense will look a little more like 2020 partially because of strength of schedule this time around. Schematically, I do think there were some things that needed to be rectified. Once Landon Collins moved closer to the line, Cam Curl was more at the point of attack, things changed.
Right.
Once the defensive line kind of had a heart-to-heart and started to be more collectively organized with one another, that changed. So I thought they improved as they went along, and then injuries and COVID really kind of ruined them at the end of the year. This time around, all I can go off of at this point is vibe, mood, and attendance. And that's the other thing that's very different about this year. They had near 100% attendance for all the voluntary stuff this offseason. There was a message that the players needed to spend more time together to buy in more to the scheme. And hopefully that pays off because that happened this spring. So I think they took all of what happened last year to heart. They had a lot of headlines saying how great they were. It certainly didn't play out that way. Then they had a rash of injuries that kind of decomposed them. Hopefully they'll have better luck on that front this year. But I think Ron Rivera talked about this the other day where he's using the word humility, that they need to earn it back. I think they agree with that they need to earn this back. They have every opportunity to do it early in the season with the way the schedule's laid out. So hopefully we'll see it.
All right, well, I know you got to go, but one quick question here to end things off. What's your prediction here on the record for the Commanders, and how far do you think they can go this season?
I think they could be, and this is largely dependent on the play of Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
If he plays well, to whatever that means, plays well, I think they're going to have double-digit wins. I think they're going to be in the playoffs one way or the other, whether they win the division or go in as a wild card. But I think 10-7 is a reasonable record for them this year, and that's what I'm hoping and what I'm expecting.
All right, well, thank you for coming on. I know you're pretty busy with camp and stuff. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you, and, yeah.
Okay, take care.
Thank you guys for watching or listening to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. We are back. It is time for football. We're going to be going to the preseason game. I'm going to have an entire episode on that, showing or saying what I saw at the preseason game. Sam Howell will probably make an appearance there. If you guys like the guest today, Bram Weinstein, we're going to have more guests on as well through the coming months leading up to this season. And then, of course, once the season hits, going to be doing recaps, previews for every game. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for it. Season 2 is finally here. See you guys in the next one. Peace.